thinking better and thinking together about life's most important issues. A place to finally meet in the middle, to think freely and reasonably about the big questions of life. This is Thinker Sensitive. Welcome to Thinker Sensitive. My name is Ryan Ragazine. I am the host of the Thinker Sensitive podcast. It is sunny here in Colorado. We are in the springtime. The weather's getting nice. And the next few days, I think, are going to be in the 70s here. So I cannot complain. Life is good. Springtime is really about restoration and renewal and new life. And I've been using this springtime to really revamp Thinker Sensitive. So I redid the slogan for Thinker Sensitive. I redid the mission statement. If you've noticed, I made new bumpers for the show. So a new intro and a new outro. I'm also in the midst of a spring marketing campaign. So I'm marketing the podcast on a couple different podcast apps. I'm promoting the podcast on Facebook and Instagram, and I'm running an ad on YouTube for the first time. So I'm excited about that. And then finally, I'm starting to do some guest appearances on other people's podcasts, which have been great. I've done 2 so far, and one will be released in June, and the other will actually be released this week. So I'm definitely trying my best to use this spring to renew some things, to revamp some things, and hopefully some positive growth comes out of it. When I think about the spring advertising campaign, the main thing that comes to mind is that I want to be a faithful steward of the generosity that's been given to me. And that relates to the topic that we're going to be discussing today. In the Gospels, Jesus tells a parable about 2 contrasting home builders, the wise builder and the foolish builder. According to the parable, the wise man built his house on a slab of rock, while the foolish builder constructed his house on sand. When a devastating storm hit with powerful winds, gushing rain, and significant flooding, the house that was built upon the rock stood strong, withstanding the intense pressure of the storm, because it was built on a solid and firm foundation. But the house that was built upon the sand succumbed to the pressure, and it ultimately couldn't withstand the intensity of the storm, eventually falling apart and crashing down because it was built on a weak and unsteady foundation. I want to talk today about self-esteem and self-worth in the social media age. Many young people live in a world where self-esteem and self-worth are predicated upon social media affirmation. My value is based on how many followers my accounts have, how many likes and shares my posts get, and whether I've gone viral or not. Our understanding of success is also rooted in these things. Success is defined by popularity, influence, reach, and status. In this contemporary situation, one could argue that we are building our self-esteem and our self-worth on a very precarious, rickety, unstable, and volatile foundation, like a person who builds her house on the sand. The thing is that this understanding of success and this source of self-worth has caused a lot of mental problems and psychological issues in our culture. And as someone who has a history with severe anxiety and severe OCD, I don't take this situation lightly. People who are experiencing success by these standards are still struggling with insecurity and issues of self-worth, feeling the pressure to stay on top and to continue to appease the masses and feed the beast, and worrying about 1,000 potential failures, and being envious of those who have even more success, or those who appear to have it all figured out or to have it easy, and feeling intense disappointment when a post doesn't reach the high standards that have been set or meet the expectations that have been formed. And it goes without saying that people who aren't experiencing success by contemporary standards are also really struggling with insecurity and a lack of self esteem. The crux of the issue, I think, is that both our understanding of success and our sense of self worth are grounded in other people rather than in ourselves, in our reputation rather than in our character, in appearances rather than in reality. To put this problem another way, our understanding of success and our self worth are built upon the sands of subjectivity instead of upon the rock of objectivity. To bring my personal belief system into this and to articulate the problem from the perspective of a Christian worldview, and I think Christianity has so many great things to say about this. The issue is that we are allowing our measure of success to be defined by people. And we are grounding our sense of worth and our sense of value in the opinions of human beings rather than in the opinion of God. The only opinion that really matters. When you ground your value in other people, you ground your value in their subjective perception of you. The problem is that the perceptions of people are more often than not skewed by a host of natural human limitations, personal biases, an absence of knowledge, an absence of context, a lack of perspective, vices, corruption, finitude, and just overall human fallibility. All of these things distort a person's view or understanding of who you are. See, people don't approach the world with clear, perfect, and unblemished lenses. Instead, people view the world through a very marked up, scratched, dirty, and distorted lens. People don't usually see us as we really are. They don't see our intentions, our hearts, our personal histories, and what goes through our minds. And what they see and what they conclude is so often marred by vice and personal corruption, prejudice, pride, self centeredness, insecurity, envy, jealousy, lust, dishonesty, and injustice. Now, let me be very clear. The same goes for us, right? For you and for me. We love to talk about the corruption of others, but hate to talk about personal corruption. If all of this is true of others, then it's certainly true of ourselves. But due to all of these natural limitations, people have the tendency to misconstrue who we are. Out of a plethora of personal limitations and personal vices, in life, people will invariably misrepresent us and paint a distorted picture of us. Like an artist who draws a caricature of you at a festival or a fair. But people don't just have false perceptions of us. They also have false perceptions of what true success is and what is truly valuable. In other words, people don't just have false perceptions about other people. They also have false perceptions about concepts and ideas. Let me give an example. You might be an artist that paints pictures as a part time job or as a hobby. And maybe you painted a beautiful portrait and posted it on social media. And maybe you were disappointed with the lackluster response, which might make you feel like a failure and that you aren't very valuable. But let me offer an alternative possibility. Maybe the lack of public appreciation of your art has more to do with your audience than you yourself. Of course, it could also have something to do with the social media algorithm as well, or the way we have been programmed to interact and engage with content. But play along with me for a second. Maybe the lack of appreciation has more to do with a lack in your audience than a lack in your ability as an artist. Maybe your audience doesn't appreciate your art because your audience doesn't appreciate good art at all. Because they lack a certain level of taste or a certain level of refinement. In the same way, maybe people view you as being unsuccessful because they misperceive what true success is. The fact that you have the time and the ability to make quality art, and the fact that this artwork brings you personal fulfillment and joy, means that you are a successful artist. Regardless of how much money you make, or how famous you are, or how people perceive you. But we still have a problem. It's the problem of human subjectivity. Specifically, the problem of our subjectivity. My subjectivity. Your subjectivity. So far, we've almost been assuming that everyone else is subjective, but we ourselves are objective. We've kind of been acting as if everyone else is misperceiving things, but we ourselves view the world through a perfect lens. So when people view us in a negative light, it must always be because of their corruption, never ours. Or when people lack appreciation for the content that we produce, it must be because of their poor taste, not ours. We know objectively that we are high quality people and that we produce high quality content, but everyone else is highly subjective and deluded. The reality is that all people are subjective, not just other people. And all people are corrupt and prone to misconceptions, not just those around us. Subjectivity doesn't just apply to other people, it applies to us as well. My opinion on myself and on my art and on the content that I produce is just as subjective as another person's opinion. So here lies the problem of human subjectivity. And here lies the value of God. God brings objectivity to the discussion. God absolutizes and objectivizes all things. God is the object, the absolute, the only possible objective standard by which to measure what is good and what is bad, what is true and what is false, what is valuable and what is not valuable, what is beautiful and what is not. I fleshed this out in much more detail in the second episode of my welcome season. But for me, God is the solid foundation, the rock upon which I have chosen to build my house. I think He's the only sure foundation and the only solid rock that can protect us from all the different storms that are sure to come our way as we walk through life. See, God is immutable. Everything else in life, Everything in time and space is mutable and volatile, from the opinions and feelings of others to the valuations of art and content to our circumstances and the social landscape. If you place your worth in other people or other things, in creatures and creation in time, you're building your house on something unsteady and unstable. But God is immutable and unchanging. You can't get more steady and stable than that. Whereas other people's perceptions of you are based on a number of human limitations, including personal corruption, God's understanding of you is perfect and unblemished. That might be scary to you. That might give you more pause than peace. But consider this: God is not only objective where we are subjective, but God is also good where we are corrupt. This means that God not only views you through a flawless lens, knowing literally everything about you with full and clear perspective, but God also views you through a loving lens, a gracious lens, and a charitable lens. So when other people only seem to see the worst in you, God sees the best in you. When other people don't recognize your good intentions, God does. When other people view you as a lost cause, God sees your infinite potential. When other people understand you as a failure, God sees all of your successes. When other people don't appreciate your work, God looks upon it with pride. When other people hold all of your past sins against you and never offer you a second chance, God forgives all of your failings and gives you a fresh start and a new way forward, over and over and over again. People will leave you and forsake you, but the perfect God of grace and love will never leave you and never forsake you. When we place our sense of worth in the hands of fallible human beings and we define success by finite human standards, we are building our homes on the sand. But when we ground our value in God and we view success through His eyes, we build our homes upon the rock. And when the storm comes, we will not be moved. Before I close, I want to give some practical recommendations and some encouragement to those who might be struggling with insecurity or a lack of self esteem or issues of self worth. The first thing that I would say is focus on the things that you can control, not on all the things that are outside of your control. Focus on character rather than reputation. Your reputation is not something that you have full control over. It's based on the perceptions of others. But you do have control over your character, over who you are, and who you are becoming. Focus on the quality of your work, not so much on how other people respond or react to it. Focus on how your work makes you feel, not on how it makes others feel. Does it bring you fulfillment? Does it make you happy? Are you proud of it? Is this something that you would still do, even if everyone else was completely out of the equation? Even if you were the only person alive? If you believe in God, Focus on the idea of stewardship. Regardless of how other people respond to your work, are you being a faithful steward of the gifts and abilities and resources that God has given you? I would encourage you to define success in accordance with these standards, not so much in accordance with the standards of popular culture. I think that you'll be much better for it, and I think you'll be more fulfilled and ultimately much more happy. When I reflect on this episode, I think I'm partially preaching to myself here. As a content creator, these are things that I struggle with just as much as anyone else. I have to constantly remind myself of these things. Sometimes we might know something in our heads that we're still trying to accept in our hearts. And I think that's where I'm at. In a lot of ways, I've always been a failure by the standards of this world. I've failed, or I haven't found fame or wealth or influence at a lot of things. For me, the two things that come to mind are music and philosophy. Though I've been playing and writing music for a very long time, I never made it in music. I never succeeded in that way. And though I've devoted so much of my life to the life of the mind and to education, I never became a best-selling author or a world-renowned scholar or even a professor. I never found success in this way. But I've often thought that at the end of the day, if I were to take everyone else out of the equation, if I were the last man standing, or the only person on earth, or if there were no prospects, no possibility of any future success, I would still make music. And I would still create content for myself and for my creator. And I would still be happy and be fulfilled doing it. And some might just call that success. I think God would. This episode, and all episodes of Thinker Sensitive, are available on thinkersensitive.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Subscribe on your favorite podcast app today to listen to more thought-provoking content from Thinker Sensitive.